Hello everybody, and welcome back to Generation Jumble, Season 4 Spooky Brawl. This is the Halloween Generation Jumble, and as you can see on screen, this time we actually have some usage rating for you guys. So, this season has been very different from the others. With Season 1, it was just random Pokemon that you guys voted for, so it was just chaos with no rhyme or reason. Season 2, we tried to change the meta by buffing some of the weaker types, but that just ended with the normals and psychics still being dominant. Season 3 ended up being kinda different, with Palisand and Gastrodon taking over everything, but for the most part, it was still very similar to Gen 1 OU. But for Season 4, well, unintentional, because the only thing we thought of was adding cool spooky Pokemon, it has changed dramatically. Here are the 10 most used Pokemon in Gen 1, and actually if you notice, well, Snorlax is not to be found here. And that's because many of these new Pokemon have changed everything. The main ones, at least when we saw round 1, being Delphox and Corviknight. Corviknight in particular has significantly changed how this game has been played. But which Pokemon were added in the first place? For Halloween Jumble, or Generation Jumble Season 4, we added Gourgeist, Gliscor, Delphox, Mimikyu, Grimmsnarl, Swoobat, Winterigus, Corviknight, Skeledirge, and Hydrapple. Some of these are a lot better than others, but I don't know where to start. I guess we'll start by going in all of these in order of the usage rates. So obviously Tauros is still pretty good, as Tauros usually is, with a 62% usage rate and a 60% win rate. It's still a beast of a Pokemon that has not really suffered too much from the new changes, although what I will say is you could get away with some teams without Tauros, but overall, there's not much to really say here, it's just good. Now on the Delphox, which is the second most used, or I guess technically it would be like, yeah, technically no, it's tied with Tauros. Delphox, honestly, I think the main thing that helps Delphox is the inclusion of Corviknight, as well as its speed. With 104 speed, you are one of the fastest status users in the game, and with Hypnosis, it's just really good. You can outspeed a lot of things, and it's part of the reason why Jolteon's gotten a lot better, because normally Zapdos is just better than Jolteon, but here, Jolteon's actually faster than Delphox, which allows it to actually do something, and it's good against Corviknight, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Not to mention, Corviknight almost always uses Light Screen, so Jolteon having the better crit rate just helps it a lot. But it wouldn't be getting this far without a Pokemon like Delphox. 104 speed is just really good, and with Corviknight everywhere, your powerful Fire Blasts are just great. It's really hard to switch into. Especially for the first round, Delphox was like kind of omnipresent, and as the tournament went on, it just got even better. So that's pretty cool. Now next is Corviknight, with the 50% usage and 50% win rate. Corviknight is just everywhere. As a defensive Pokemon, it is second to none. And Corviknight is kind of the main reason why Snorlax is kind of falling out of favor. The stats don't look like it's the most dominant thing in the world, but Steel Flying is just stupidly good in Gen 1. You assist both normal and psychic, and with Light Screen, you can somewhat deal with electric moves as long as you are careful. And many sets like Reflect Wax just aren't as good, because Reflect Wax is just inferior to just using a Corviknight. And this is with Corviknight using Leer. I guess there's typically Amnesia Wax, and Pokemon such as, I guess there's not really anything that can fully take over what Snorlax does, but Snorlax just isn't as useful in this meta. And I know Zastro is a big defender for Snorlax, and it's not a bad Pokemon by any means, but it's not in the big three. And speaking of which, well, it's kind of surprising, Chansey is also not in the big three. Also, I think I'm just gonna stay on this screen for a little bit because I'm tired of seeing a load. But Chansey, the usage rate is like a 41%, which is insane. But to be fair, look at that win rate. It wins a lot, and you cannot deny that it's really good. But it just in this meta, it's just not mandatory anymore. It's good on most teams, and you probably do need a really good reason not to use it. But for the most part, Chansey is just like, it's just not the same metagame anymore. You'll probably get a better vibe once you see some of these replays. But overall, Chansey is just good. And so is Starmie. Which, the difference between Chansey and Starmie is, even though they have the exact same percentage rate, the win rate is very, very different. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Starmie can't be as versatile with his moveset anymore. Psychic you just don't use that much because Corviknight and Delphox don't care about it at all. Blizzard is okay, but by far the main things you should be using are Surf and Thunderbolt. Because, obviously, Corviknight is weak to Thunderbolt, and Delphox is weak to Surf. But in general, this also just gives other Pokemon chances to catch up and take advantage of it. For example, Gourgeist has been doing really well, and a lot has to do with Surf Bolt being everywhere. And to be honest, there have been some Starmie sets that even get rid of Thunder Wave, just going for Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Surf, just to have as much coverage as possible. Because, along with Gourgeist, Gliscor also is just a really good Pokemon this season. Rhydon's also good, but Gliscor can just get a lot of free opportunities to go for a Sword Stance, or just to get a good attack in. And like I said, Jolteon's doing better, and Jolteon does worse against Gliscor than Zapdos does. So overall, just a lot better than it did in Season 1, where I think most people kind of forgot about Gliscor. And Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl overall is just very solid. It hits pretty decently hard on both the physical and special side. Spirit Break hits really hard, and it can lower special attack. And it also has Thunder Wave. Thunder Wave's always good. It's bulky enough to get with Rest. Overall, just a good Pokemon. But is it better than Alakazam? Looking at the win rate, you might think so. Out of every other Pokemon here, 83% win rate is just insane. The only thing that comes close is Chansey, but also has one of the lowest usage rates of the top 10, being at 25%, which is still good, don't get me wrong. And even with a dark type like Grimmsnarl, Alakazam can just find opportunities to do things. But with Grimmsnarl and Corviknight, it does make it annoying. But as you can definitely tell from that win rate, when you can use Alakazam properly, it's just amazing. And last but not least, in the top 10 we have Mimikyu. Mimikyu is just a pretty good and solid Pokemon. Now, unlike with my original What If video, this time Mimikyu has Play Rough, and with Play Rough, it just gives it a really good strong stab move to take advantage of. And we also have good targets to actually hit it with. For example, Grimmsnarl is weak to Fairy, Hydrapple is also weak to Fairy, and neither Poison or Fire actually resist Fairy, only Steel resists Fairy, which means Corviknight is the only thing that doesn't care being hit with a Play Rough. So while Mimikyu isn't the tankiest thing in the world, it's absolutely terrifying when it gets a Sword Stance up, so not something you want to mess with. So that's it about the top 10, and this is just how I'll give an introduction, because as I'll do the other videos on round 2 and round 3, etc., I'll talk about more of the other Pokemon, but for now, before going on to some of the highlights, which were chosen by some of my council members, let's see how some of the council members actually think about this meta. We'll only start with Sotina and Second Theus today, and for my next video, I'll have Plausible and Cyber DJ talk. So, let's see what they have to say. Starting off with Second Theus. He didn't have any replays, it was mostly Sotina that gave me his replays, but whatever, let's just read this, alright? I don't really have any favorite replays. I haven't gotten around to watching them all myself yet. But this season, much like others, have come to show us a pattern. 2 or 3 months we add inevitably rise to top 5 status, Starmie remains winning, Pokemon we bring back from an old season team to perform rather well, maybe Hydreigon can shine one day. Some people that aren't too popular or good surprised us by being a meta threat. There was always Pokemon that seemed like they'd shine due to their move pools, but just end up falling apart. Unlike Season 3, which focused more on winning with Amnesia or countering Amnesia, Season 4 is focused more on stat drops and status. Hypnosis and Thunder Wave are very important tools, and as are Leer, Mystical Fire, and Spirit Break. Yes, Leer. And I forgot about it, but yeah, Mystical Fire is also being used by Delphox, and it's really good. It's just lowering special attack. Pivoting between your defensive cores, typically Core plus Gliscor plus Runerigus, to find an opening for Pokemon like Delphox is key. Mystical Fire and Spirit Break are such consistent moves, they can create a battle state where the opponent is forced to switch and eat hits constantly, which then opens up free turns for Fire Spin, Hypnosis, or Reflect. My time in this season was short, due to the poor team building and poor RNG, but it was fun. The Pokemon added this season have largely been big hits aside from Skeletor and Swoobat. Even Gourgeist is proving to be niche enough to provide value. All in all, this season, people will enjoy going back to later down the line. Then you have Season 1, Season 3, Season 4, and Season 2. Would be my personal season rankings. I'll need to find time for Season 4 more, but I can see it bumping up to 2nd place. So that's Zacynthia's, and I'll be honest with you guys, this season is also very different from the others because I was largely not involved. I was just focused on other things or just sleeping a lot. So it was really just Sotina and Zacynthia's really managing everything. So a lot of the replays you're going to be seeing today, I'm seeing for the first time. Despite that, it's kind of funny that despite knowing mostly nothing about this meta, I made the winner's bracket. But we'll go over that for the future videos. For now, let's see what Sotina has to say. That season is weird, but has a lot of development. From the fall-off of Big 3 in general, Snorlax only having one viable set, being at best in B tier, has been quite baffling. Changi ranges, but isn't mandatory, and Tauros is kinda mandatory, but still feels worse to use than it is in vanilla. And then we have a look at Eggy and Victreebel and Cloyster, all of whom guaranteed to follow the underuse due to being way worse. Still about the CD viability, but it's not that awful, but quite a big fall off. And for our new edition, definitely power crept a tier to be very extent, and the meta has been oppressed by 2 guys in particular, Delphox and Corviknight. Those 2 being the reason why Eggy and Cloyster don't cut anymore, and Jinx being forced outside the lead role unless it risks being OHKO'd by Delphox, so Jinx became more of a mid-game tool, making the lead meta kinda stale with only Starmie and Zam being used in Hypno, who has been quite better this time around, and Grimmsnarl with Gourgeist being a niche lead option. Mystical Fire and Spirit Break are 2 very impressive options this season, and they go quite well together. This is the only reason why Delphox can try to run Rest, but it is also a great supporter for its team, as both speed control due to Gen 1 Parala mechanic, and making things like Gliscor surviving Ice Beam a possibility. This season has a lot of playing offense on defense, so you need to exploit the defensive attribute of your breakers, or make you defensive mon able to break better. Chansey only runs Bolt Beam this season. There is a lot of cool stuff, and I feel like we can see a lot more niche options come up over time, like Almasar being pretty decent in the Corviknight, or Delphox, for example, and Gyarados being better without Eggy around. Overall, this season, with the less hold, both weird place in my heart, and both a great contender for my favorite season. Councilmember Sotina, out. Thank you very much for both Zacynthia's and Sotina for giving me your thoughts. I don't really have anything to say about either one of them. I think both of them are just kind of right about it. I'm very curious to see what Plausible and Cyber DJ have to say, and I will be asking other members about what they think as well. The main 2 I'm thinking of will be Riscado and Zastui, But for both of you watching this video, do not tell me your thoughts in DMs until I actually, like, DM you about it. Because I'm still not sure when I'm gonna ask. But overall, this seems to be a very divisive season. Not so much with people disagreeing on the big things. Like, obviously, everyone is, you know, agreeing that Delphox and Corviknight are great. But in terms of actual tier lists, I've seen them vary a lot. So that's another reason why I'm going to be asking non-council members for this season as well. There's a lot of things going on, and it's, I don't know, it's going to be fun to see. Now, we have a few highlights from Season 1, which a lot of these are going to be pretty fun. This one I have seen, but most of these I haven't. Now, Shelly Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus CDSB. Oh boy, this is the one that's in infamy, and you're about to see why. So we have Lead Starmie versus Lead Delphox. Delphox has to switch out, getting a chance to paralyze, which, so far, it's like what you expect. Grimmsnarl gets paralyzed, but it can still go for a powerful Spirit Break. Corviknight gets hit, doesn't care, nor does it care about the special attack drop. So Shelly goes into Delphox, using it as a mid-game Pokemon instead of a lead. Missing Hypnosis, but it doesn't matter because it's switching to Chansey. But then you miss Fire Spin, but Chansey is paralyzed, so you're fine. You go back into Grimmsnarl, eating a Thunder Wave. And unfortunately, you just don't move. Chansey hits an Ice Beam, but it's not that much. They go back into Corviknight, you go for Spirit Break, and that does even worse. So, just not very good. They try to go for Body Slam, but you don't switch, you don't get paralyzed. And by the way, Grimmsnarl being able to hit Chansey pretty hard is really nice, but I don't remember if that's one of the reasons why Chansey fell off. One thing I will say though is going for Hyper Beam was definitely a risky play. But I guess for me personally, I just like using, what's it called, Rest on my Grimmsnarl, but that's not always guaranteed. But luckily, Shelly did get a chance to go for a substitute on a Gliscor. And due to the Gliscor's high defense, it can even survive a Body Slam and not have it break the substitute. They go into Rhydon, you get another free substitute off, and Earthquake easily OHKOs Rhydon. You're unable to do anything about that. They go into Chansey, but Earthquake is not enough for an OHKO, so Chansey breaks the sub. You go for another Earthquake, it kills, obviously. You go into Tauros, Tauros misses Blizzard, but Shelly, with the 1 in 256 glitch, misses Earthquake, which is huge. Now you go on the Corviknight. They go into their own Corviknight, you go for a Light Screen. Your Drill Peck is enough to kill. It's still not unwinnable, but there's Delphox. Corviknight gets put to sleep. You stay in, or not stay in, you don't move. But unfortunately, they called it, so they went for Thunder Punch. So Starmie has taken a lot of damage. Gets hit with a crit! So Starmie is taken out. You go into Tauros. You hit Body Slam. It kills. Okay. You go into your own Tauros. Gets a critical Body Slam. But then Shelly goes and hits his own critical Body Slam. Now it's just a speed tie. CD wins. Kills with, like, Hyper Beam. There's another Hyper Beam. Gets the crit! And the crit was definitely unnecessary. All you have left is a Corviknight, which, unfortunately, Tauros doesn't use, what's it called, Earthquake anymore. It's way more likely to use Bolt Beam. Or, actually, it might be Blizzard's Cut. I forget exactly. Either way, there is that. A match that only happened because Shelly missed a 1 in 256 glitch. And even with that, CDSB got multiple crits where they were absolutely needed. So GG's to both players, but clearly one of you wanted it way more than the other. Sorry about that. Next up, we have AJ versus Ibuki. This one is interesting to me because AJ is someone that appears in the server a decent amount and is very active in my comment section, but only really played in Generation Jumble Season 1. So this is the first time he got to play again in a while. And Ibuki is someone that's very new. Someone who has gotten my attention because they joined my server when I was just not making a lot of YouTube videos. There was a huge content drought. Obviously, my council members and very prominent people like Shelly and Zashly stayed around because they just like hanging out in the community in general. But I would not have been surprised if a lot of people left, and the server was a little bit less active around this time. But Ibuki joined. They never left, even when there was just no content. And then they ended up joining the tournament, and as you'll see, they did pretty well. Like, amazingly well for just someone who's a beginner. And AJ was also just someone who I was happy to see again. So this match was exciting, and we're going to look at it right now. Now we have Gorgeist, and they used the small version. Gorgeist gets paralyzed, but AJ just goes straight for an explosion. Now you have the Delphox mirror. AJ's is clearly the superior one, even though it's not nicknamed. You go in the Slowbro, which has gotten a little bit better with both Delphox and Corviknight, but I do not know how good it is exactly. We'll find out when we see the other videos. You go for a Amnesia, although I guess Bolt Beam Chansey being the main and only good Chansey is also kind of annoying for Slowbro. Here's Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl can keep lowering Slowbro's special, but Slowbro is very tanky on the physical side, so maybe it's not that bad. But there's another hit. Slowbro is not doing well. Goes for Paralysis, but I don't know how. How did Grimmsnarl move first? Was there something I'm missing? There had to have been. But we do have Dragonite, which is pretty cool. Now, granted, Wrap Locking is... Honestly, I just do not think it's a good idea, especially since, unlike in regular Gen 1, this time Dragonite has something to fear. It hits with a super effective Spirit Break, and Blizzard didn't even do that much beforehand, and Hyper Beam was not enough to kill the Grimmsnarl, so the Grimmsnarl gets an easy kill, but still, I appreciate the effort. Here's Chansey. It hits a Psychic, and now it's trapped in a Fire Spin lock, so this is annoying, but not something that Chansey fears too much. You can switch into Starmie, probably the best thing you could switch into when they're going for a Fire Spin. Starmie does not care about this one bit. It can just wait until it's able to move again, which doesn't matter, because even then, like, look at that. That's not really that much damage. That's just, what, like, a critical hit with a, yeah, just like 20%? Not much. There's Surf hitting pretty hard. Delphox is taken out. You go on the Swoobat, but unfortunately Starmie is faster. It gets a crit on Swoobat, killing it. And last, you have Hydrapple. And this I thought was pretty cool. Now, AJ here is using a Substitute Growth Hydrapple set. So while in that sub, it cannot go for growth, and thank God he had that sub, otherwise he would have been killed. Luckily with Chansey also paralyzed, you are just able to go for those subs and get those growths in, and even though it's the last Pokemon against 4 others, there is a decent chance Hydrapple can win this. It just needs to get a little lucky and play the long game. So it goes for Recover. Chansey is once again fully paralyzed. You can keep going for those growths, which is very needed when you know for a fact this Chansey has Ice Beam. But unfortunately, you're fully paralyzed there. But because of your growths, you tank the Ice Beam decently well. Granted, I feel like it's better to go for Substitute rather than Recover in that instance. That's mostly because for me personally, I would be very scared of a crit. But there's not a right or wrong answer there. They go into Tauros, you go for Recover. They go for Body Slam, which is an interesting choice. You hit Fickle Beam, but unfortunately Fickle Beam was a crit, so it did not kill. You go for Substitute. They try going for Blizzard. They don't get the crit, but it doesn't matter. It's still enough to break the sub. They go for Blizzard. I think you kind of have to go for Fickle Beam. Yeah, you go for it. Still anyone's game. There's Chansey, fully paralyzed. They go for Fickle Beam, but not that much. I personally would probably just go for Substitute Recover there. But there's an Ice Beam, does not kill. They are fully paralyzed, which sucks. There's another Ice Beam. That one gets the crit. So Ibuki has won the game. Overall, pretty close. And AJ had a pretty good shot at winning there. Honestly. And like, even if like they did go for extra growths, that wouldn't have actually changed like the crit. Because I'm pretty sure even with max... Yeah, I'm pretty sure even with max special, I'm pretty sure Fickle Beam would not have been able to kill Chansey. So at that point... Oh wait, no, that was... Oh wait. Fickle Beam only has 8 power points. Now I'm starting to wonder if Was this unwinnable? I don't know. I really don't. Let me know in the comments below what you think. But here we have Riscato versus Sotina. Two of our most experienced players and two of the best. And by far the two most vocal about their opinions on different metas, as well as the most ideas for future metas. So this should be a fun match, if not a brutal one. We're starting with lead Hypno versus lead Starmie. Like Sotina said in her comment, Hypno has gotten a little bit better, but that's mostly because other Pokemon such as Executor and Cloyster have gotten worse, and lead Jinx is just super risky now. All that just means that Hypno just gets a lot of advantages, because Hypno is not weak to fire, nor is it weak to ice or electric or anything like that. So it does pretty good now. I'm probably going to say enough to beat OU, but I'll have to see what the rest of the council says. That might be like a little too... That might be a bit of a stretch, we'll have to see. But as for the match, one interesting thing about Gourgeist is that despite only having 50-something special, Fire Punch is really good, and that's for being able to hit Corviknight. It's part of the reason why Gourgeist is doing better than Executor. And here's Jolteon resisting that Drill Peck easily. Sotina switches out expecting a Ride-On, but instead it's Chansey. You go into Jinx. Jinx resists the Ice Beam very easily. They go into Starmie. You go for a Lovely Kiss. Personally, I would have just been aggressive and just assumed they would have switched out. But maybe that's just me saying that with just 20/20 vision. You get the Special Drop, which is good. Jinx is paralyzed, but not the worst thing in the world. You switch into Hypno, they go into Jolteon. You decide not to sack, you go into Gourgeist. It's paralyzed, but Gourgeist only had 54 base special, or not special, speed anyways. So it's not a big deal. Jolteon switches in. Even with the light screen, you usually would expect Corviknight to be scared. But to their surprise, Corviknight stayed in. With that light screen, Riscato thought it was worth risking a rest. There's a Thunderbolt, it doesn't get the crit. You go back into Jinx. Jinx eats a Thunderwave very easily. In comes Starmie. In comes Jolteon predicting Starmie. And they stayed in, so Starmie gets KO'd. The first KO of this match. A lot of switching around still. But to my surprise, Riscato went into Gyarados. Went for a Hydro Pump predicting a switch, but instead, Sotina stayed in with Gourgeist. Another Hydro Pump, once again predicting a switch, but Sotina is just reading Riscato very easily. They're forced to switch into Gyarados, and they go into Jolteon. It's going very well for Sotina so far, even getting a critical double kick, doing 28% to Jolteon. But Jolteon stayed in, and it gets fully paralyzed, which is a huge deal, and Riscato's Jolteon goes for rest. There's now not much that Sotina's Jolteon can do. It's forced to switch. Jolteon gets a free turn to sleep. You go into Corviknight, which eats a Body Slam even with a crit. But now, does that Thunderbolt? Probably doesn't. So Corviknight does get a chance to sleep. You go back into Chansey. They paralyze the Chansey, which is probably more of a good thing. A free switch into Hypno is pretty nice though. Going for Psychic, trying to get those special drops. You get it, and Chansey's fully paralyzed. Really hard to deal with right now, but Chansey does go for a Soft Boil. Hypno is once again fully paralyzed, but Ice Beam does not kill. You go for another Psychic, and Ice Beam finally does kill, but this Chansey is not in a good spot. In comes Jinx. You go into Jolteon. Once again fully paralyzed, very annoying. There's Psychic, no special drop that time. In fact, you're just fully paralyzed. But Riscato is probably predicting something else, so went for Ice Beam. Once again, still going for Ice Beam, getting a crit, but is not doing that much. And Sotina gets a perfect opportunity to rest. There's not much chance he can really do here. They're predicting a switch in, which was correct. They go into Gyarados, but Body Slam is enough to take down Gyarados. In comes the Tauros Mirror, but Sotina gets a critical Body Slam, huge, and Riscato does not get the same luxury. They are forced to go into something else. Sotina tried going for the kill with Corviknight, but it was not enough. Corviknight wakes up safely. They go into Jolteon. Corviknight goes for a Light Screen, and goes for a Leer, going aggressive with it. And it looks like it sort of paid off because Corviknight did survive. Going for a Thunderbolt, but getting the crit, so Corviknight is taken out. Now they go into Tauros. which whatever they send in should be enough to kill. You went for Earthquake, which does nothing to Gourgeist, just absolutely nothing. Predicting an explosion, you go into Chansey. All you have left is a Sleeping Jolteon, which wakes up, thankfully, but it gets hit with a critical Earthquake. Very unfortunate. All you have left is Tauros, but they win the speed tie, so Hyper Beam does take it out. Overall, a very insane 60-turn game. A lot of twists and turns there, but I think it's a very fun and very entertaining one. You can definitely see how skilled both trainers are. And now, we have Cyber DJ versus Master Gemstone. Both of these two are pretty prominent people for Generation Jumble, so I don't think introductions are very necessary. We start with the Weed Alakazam versus the Weed Gengar, and starting off with a special drop, so it's just going pretty well for Gemstone so far. You switch in the Runerigus, but unfortunately Gemstone went for Ice Beam, which does good damage to Runerigus. You go back into Starmie, gets hit with a crit, and now you're forced to recover, and Chansey goes for another Ice Beam, trying to fish for that freeze. You go into Gyarados, which is the second time we're seeing Gyarados today. Pretty surprising. There's Body Slam. Does decent damage. Go for another Body Slam, no crit. Chansey goes for Soft Boiled. You switch out in the Mimikyu. Usually pretty early, but since you know they're probably going for Body Slam, a very easy switch in. There's Swords Dance. They go for Surf, you get the crit, but a crit is not enough to kill. And Flare Up does a lot of damage, but it's not enough. You go into Chansey, they're forced to recover. Chansey, I'm assuming will go for Thunder Wave, which Gyarados can absorb. There's Hydro Pump, probably predicting something else. But Chansey stays in, goes for a Thunderbolt, doing massive damage, and Hyper Beam is not enough. Not enough to kill. Now, does Chansey go for Stop Boiled? Yes, it does. It doesn't go for the kill. You're forced to switch. They switch too, going to their Mimikyu. You go into Starmie, they go for Play Rough, which gets the crit, but Starmie survives like a champ, taking out the Mimikyu. They go into Zam, which can very easily revenge kill that Starmie. Now, you go into your own Alakazam. They go into their own Runerigus. Crazy that both of these trainers were using Runerigus, now that I think about it. But there is the mid-game Delphox. There's a special drop, but they stay in, going for Hypnosis, I had to guess. They go into Gengar, you go for Hypnosis, Gengar is now asleep. They go into Zam, you go for Psychic, getting that crit, which is good because you do have a special drop. You go into Chansey, obviously Cyber DJ tries to heal. They go back into Gyarados, and they're going to get at least one attack off. Or they would have and went for Runerigus, eating that Body Slam. But Psychic was not enough to kill. Hydro Pump clutches out, KO the Runerigus. Now we're back to both of these Zams. Obviously, you go back into Chansey, eats a Seismic Toss like it's nothing. They go in the Gyarados, you go for Ice Beam. Gyarados is taken out, but it's already done its job. There is Runerigus, you go for Amnesia, and luckily Chansey is fully paralyzed, which is very needed. Which, by the way, for Runerigus, you only use Amnesia defensively. Something that I think is just kind of interesting. But now, so far we have Runerigus waking up, getting hit with a crit, which does kill it, unfortunately. Back in the Gengar you go, assuming a switch, they go into their own Zam. You try to go for Thunder Wave, yes you do, but unfortunately Chansey kinda, blocks it. But luckily you do get a special drop, so you don't care about that Ice Beam, except when you do, when you get frozen, you're forced to go into your Tauros against a healthy Alakazam. It's just going terribly for Gemstone here. You go for Psychic, no crit, but they are fully paralyzed. Going for another one, still no crit, but it's fine. Alakazam did its job. Because now you have your own healthy Tauros. Their Tauros cannot compete, nor can your frozen Alakazam. Gets hit with a crit, and now you go into Starmie, which is healthy, sure, but it's weak. So you go for Recover. And Chansey paralyzes the Starmie, so the Tauros is just in a guaranteed position. There's Thunderbolt, not doing that much, but it's fine, you still have Delphox. Gengar's fully asleep, you go for Psychic, hits really hard, Gengar is just not doing anything for the rest of the game. It is taken out. And even while paralyzed, this Delphox on its own has the potential to take out the rest of the team. but unfortunately he gets hit with a crit, but it doesn't matter. The damage has already been done. Tauros comes in for the kill, killing the Tauros. The Starmie, which is paralyzed, gets hit with a Hyper Beam, killing it and giving Master Gemstone the win. That was also a pretty crazy game. And I don't think we are done with these two. We have another match between them. Let's see how this one goes. Now we have Wheat Delphox versus Wheat Alakazam. They go into Mimikyu, which is a very interesting choice. Mimikyu gets put to sleep, but wakes up immediately because it's just cool that way. Fire Blast hits, but surprisingly, Mimikyu tanks it surprisingly well. Going for Sword Stance I think is pretty risky, but I can respect it. And now Mimikyu goes for Hyper Beam, doesn't get the kill, but Delphox is incredibly weak. And it's fully paralyzed, so, you know, sometimes you just don't get punished. Delphox is taken out, you go into Tauros, you switch in the Corviknight, you hit with a Blizzard, which you don't care about. They go into Starmie, you go for Light Screen, Starmie goes for Thunderbolt, and Corviknight just goes immediately for Body Slam, trying to fish for that paralysis. You're still not getting a crit, Corviknight is mostly doing well, but still no paralysis. You go for Recover, they go for Rest, and now Starmie has some chances to fish for a crit, but they're still not getting it. Corviknight is fine so far. You use another Thunderbolt, Corviknight's still fine, it wakes up, you go for another Thunderbolt, still, you are not getting a crit, but they're not getting a paralysis either. Another Thunderbolt hits, you go for Rest. Now, even though it's looking kinda good, eventually, you will get a crit because it's Starmie, like you see there. So, you even get a second one in a row. That is, funny enough, I think that's actually kinda mandatory. But now they go into Chansey. Chansey paralyzes Cyber's Chansey. You go back into Mimikyu, sacking it off because why not? Go into Delphox, Fire Blast because you were predicting something else I had to imagine. But to its credit, Fire Blast did hit decently hard. But Chansey not really being a big threat to Delphox, no reason why you can't just stay in. Now Gliscor would be a big threat. Cyber goes for Agility, and now it has to switch because you can't risk being hit with Ice Beam. You go back into Delphox, Chansey heals, you're gonna burn up some sleep turns, but with Seismic Toss, Delphox is on a timer, so they're forced to switch out again, going back into Chansey. And now you go back into Delphox predicting something else, but they still go for a Seismic Toss. But luckily you do wake up, but you're hurt pretty bad, so you go into Alakazam. Chansey tried to go for the kill, but it didn't matter here. You hit a critical Psychic, but now Zam is paralyzed, which is very unfortunate, because it worked so much in the last game, but still, no reason why I can't say Gemstone are adapting, and with Reflect, even Gliscor and Tauros won't be good counters later on, assuming this Zam stays in is still pretty healthy. You're fully paralyzed again, you go back into Chansey, and Alakazam is still not moving. There, it's a Seismic Toss, does really good damage, and again, you're not able to move. It is so hard. And a third full paralysis. Zam is taken out. Now you go into your Tauros against a paralyzed Chansey, where you get the critical Body Slam, not enough for a kill. Tauros is paralyzed. You go into Starmie, you go for a Body Slam, but you get the crit, which is huge. You go for Surf, not enough, and not even a crit. Body Slam kills. You go into your own Chansey, but Chansey gets killed again. Now you have Tauros, and your Tauros is healthy. You hit a critical Body Slam, but it's not enough. You go for Hyper Beam, not enough for a kill. Tauros gets its own kill. So now, all you have left is Chansey, and you have Delphox, which is low, but not dead. You get a Ice Beam, a critical Body Slam does kill. So now you have Delphox, low HP, but it's technically still winnable. In comes Gliscor, you hit the Hypnosis, which, oh my gosh, you would have been boned if that didn't hit. There's Psychic, does decent damage. You go into Articuno, Psychic gets a crit. So now, you go on the Fire Blast, it does kill the Articuno. And now they go back in the Gliscor, there's a Psychic, Gliscor does not wake up, so getting the ultimate clutch. Master Gemstone wins Game 2. Wow. Just wow. That was awesome. And you guys should know at this point that Cyber DJ is just a good player. And it's really cool to see just how much Gemstone has grown since his games. That was a fun set. Next, we have Plausible, one of the other council members, versus the real EGR. I haven't seen this match myself, but I do know the twists that you're going to see here. We start with Weed Jolteon versus Weed Delphox. Both status each other, and immediately we go into Almastar. Almastar is weak to Earthquake, but Corviknight is a great partner for it. You go on the Delphox, they go for Drill Peck, getting some free chip damage in. You go on the Almastar, which will very easily tank up that Fire damage. You go into Hydrapple, but you go into Executor, which is a pretty interesting choice for this season. You go for Sweet Powder. Hydrapple is now asleep, nowhere near as big a threat as it could have been. Psychic does not get the special drop, unfortunately. You go for another Psychic, but even without a special drop, it is doing great chip damage. You're forced to switch into Corviknight. There, it gets hit with a Psychic and the special drop. This Executor is out for blood. You go into your own Corviknight, and you go for Leer, and they try to paralyze you. They're forced to switch out. You go for Drill Peck, doing some decent chip. You go back into Executor because what's Gliscor going to do? Kill the Rock Slide? It doesn't even have a flinch chance. Unfortunately, Plas kind of forgets they didn't kill Hydrapple. A real Keck W moment. But it doesn't matter. They're in a great position. This Gliscor is basically dead. You go into Almastar. Ice Beam gets the crit, which was definitely necessary. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You go into Mimikyu. And even though with its high defense, Almastar could have maybe stayed in. It's probably just better just to go for, Corviknight. And that critical Drill Peck definitely helps you out a lot. They go into Delphox, you go for another Drill Peck, doing decent chip. You go back into Almastar. They call that you're switching that and went for Psychic. But even Psychic, as you see, did not do that much damage. Hydro Pump didn't do a lot either. We go for Seismic Toss, predicting they switch into something else. Also, I was like a few seconds old once I found out Almastar had Seismic Toss. But here's Corviknight, not caring about the Blizzard. Drill Peck doing any chip to Tauros is just pretty good. Going for another Drill Peck, just making it very easy to deal with this Tauros later. Corviknight, for the most part, has already done its job. You go into your own Tauros, going for Body Slam, since I imagine you're predicting it's switching to something else. Blizzard does get the freeze though, so maybe it would be better just to play aggressively, but I don't know. Tauros just sits there, gets killed, but I think this Jolteon's still healthy. But it doesn't matter, because you have... Oh no, it's asleep, yeah. But it doesn't matter, because you have Zam. Zam takes out Delphox pretty easily. They go into Mimikyu. Mimikyu is pretty weak, so it gets killed by Psychic. They go into Corviknight, but you have Jolteon, and now Corviknight just can't deal with Jolteon. Substitute is a pretty interesting choice, however. You go for Body Slam. It's doing, like, pretty decent chip, but still, if this Jolteon wakes up, Corviknight might be in danger. Or maybe not. Looks like Jolteon won't be waking up in time, which is unfortunate. And going for Hyper Beam, you don't see that every day. But now that we know that this Corviknight is only really using normal moves, this Almastar is looking even better. It can resist everything that... Oh god, that was not what I was expecting. But yeah, Almastar is now won completely. Hydro Pump was not enough to kill, but it doesn't matter, because the damage has already been done. Seismic Toss doing chip damage is more than enough to win that battle. Alright, only 2 more replays left, and then I'll leave it off for today. We have another match between these two. Let's see how this one goes. We have Lead Gliscor versus Lead Delphox. Plausible switches out, afraid of Hypnosis missing. You go for Sword Stance, knowing that this Drill Peck won't do that much to you. You go for Rock Slide, you got a crit, but it doesn't really matter too much. Now, even with the Sword Stance, Rock Slide isn't really doing that much. So actually, Corviknight might win the 1v1. So we'll have to see. Corviknight goes for Rest. So now, you go for another Sword Stance, which I guess is fair enough. But I just don't think you want to do enough damage in time. Now, Plas called they were going for another Sword Stance, which was very risky, but it definitely worked out for them. In comes Mimikyu. You miss Hypnosis, unfortunately. But so far, you can kind of handle this. You go for another Hypnosis, Mimikyu's put to sleep, They go into Tauros. You go for Psychic, getting a critical hit, almost killing the Tauros. You go into Corviknight. They tried going for Earthquake, but it just did not hit because, you know, Flying type. They go into their own Delphox, but luckily you got able to wake up, which is huge. Now, Delphox is paralyzed, missing another Hypnosis. You go into your own Delphox in order to eat up that Hypnosis. They go into Hydrapple. You go for a Mystical Fire. Hydrapple is now weakened. And even with Hydro Pump, it's just not doing enough damage. Now, you switch into Zam, because Zam is not scared of this Hydrapple whatsoever. It can go for Psychic as much as it wants. There's one against Delphox, even getting a Special Drop, which is really good. You go into your own Delphox, eating up the Hypnosis. They actually go for Rest, which is actually really good in this case, because, like, EGR's team is just really hard, I can't really deal with this. You go into Zam, they go for Growth. If I had to guess, you're probably going for Recover. But no, even better, he calls the Fickle Beam and gets the kill on Hydrapple. Let's go, Plausible. That is awesome. In comes Corviknight. You go into Zapdos. And this Zapdos can kind of just eat this entire team alive, now that I'm looking at it. What do you really do here? Even if you get a Paralysis, they just go for Agility. Thunderbolt does good damage, great damage on Mimikyu. Mimikyu is taken out with a critical hit. Now, you go into Tauros. You do outspeed Zapdos, sure, but unless you get a freeze, it's fine. Zapdos takes that out too. In comes the paralyzed Delphox. Thunderbolt gets a crit, killing the Delphox. Last and most certainly least is Corviknight, which cannot defeat these Zapdos, so EGR surrenders. Really good and very fun game there as well. We have one more left, and I do not actually know who this is. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that I told them they can also include the first round for Losers Bracket as well. And we have Rescaldo versus Wizard Jesus. Wizard Jesus went up going against Zack and Theus, but ended up losing. But he did put up a pretty good fight. Now let's see how these two do. We have Wheat Grimstone versus Wheat Starmie. Pretty interesting, but I kind of like it. You go for Spirit Break, lowering Starmie's special attack. That's kind of annoying. You go into Corviknight, go for another Spirit Break. Does not do that much. And Corviknight doesn't care about the special attack drop either. But you do paralyze the Corviknight, which honestly isn't really that impactful. But Fire Punch is. I didn't even realize it had that, but that's not bad. There's Chansey, but it eats the Fire Punch very easily. Not so much a Spirit Break. And Ice Beam does not get the kill. Chansey goes for Thunder Wave. You know for a fact that it's going for South Bow next turn. It's no reason not to just like do a bit of annoyance. You go for Amnesia there, but you're forced to switch out. Jolteon goes for Thunderbolt. Gliscor eats it very easily. You go on the Gourgeist, you go for Agility, which isn't helping too much because Gourgeist doesn't care. You hit with a Wing Attack, but even against a Grass type, Wing Attack is just not doing that much. But a Special Drop is a pretty big deal, and you do get a crit as well. Gliscor is not having a good time. You go for another Wing Attack, and it does do good damage, and you will be able to kill next turn, but they go into Jolteon, eating up the Wing Attack very easily. And Earthquake is enough to kill. Thankfully, Agility does make you fast enough. Wing Attack does kill the Gourgeist as well, so this Gliscor is doing a lot of work so far. You go for a Wing Attack, but it does nothing to Corviknight. Corviknight kills it easily. But now here comes Delphox. You go for a Thunder Punch, but unfortunately, Starmie survives. You go on the Renorigas, 1-256 Surf Miss, which is crazy. You go into Earthquake, but it's just not enough against Starmie. Starmie heals easily. You can go for Amnesia, but it's not too hard to say that you can just fish for a critical hit. Starmie is in a very comfortable position, while Renorigas is fighting for its life. Do you get the crit? No, you don't. Renorigas is definitely going for... Okay, never mind, it's not going for Rest. I assumed it would. But I guess you wanted to force out Recover just to make it more comfortable for you. There is a Surf, not really doing that much, but this can change at any moment. Renorigas wakes up. It's gonna go for Earthquake, if I had to imagine. Or going for Psychic for a Special Drop. That works too. Now, Starmie switches out. And Corviknight is also taking a lot of damage too. So this could... I would say this can go either way though. Especially when you hit a Sing, but unfortunately Renorigas wakes up. And Renorigas does kill the Chansey. You go into Starmie. going for Surf, you get the crit, which you desperately needed. You go on the Corviknight. They paralyze the Corviknight. Corviknight cannot move. And now, going for Surf, doing somewhat decent chip, but you're going to need a crit to really hit past that light screen. Now, Body Slam does not kill there. So luckily, you can still do things for your own Corviknight. Corviknight goes for Rest, and this might be a long game, folks. You go for Drill Peck, not much is going on there. You switch into Delphox, they go into Starmie, perfect prediction there. Getting Surf, does not get the kill, and Hypnosis misses. That is huge. You go for Swoobat. Swoobat takes a lot of damage from Surf. You go for another Surf, but Swoobat does not get killed. Starmie gets paralyzed. And now you go for Super Fang, doing great damage. Starmie is once again unable to move. You had a Psychic, but you don't get a kill or a special drop. Starmie heals. Then you go for Super Fang, and Starmie goes for another Recover. Swoobat cannot really hurt this Starmie. It can try to lower its HP, but you can always just recover off the damage. You go for Amnesia, they go for another Healing. You try going for Psychic, still not doing a lot of damage, but you do get the special drop, which is pretty good. Surf does kill, even with the special stats for both of them. Thunder Punch gets a crit, killing the Starmie. But you have Tauros, and Tauros is still a beast of a Pokemon. You go for Earthquake, but Corviknight's immune. You go for Fire Blast, does a lot of damage to the Corviknight. Corviknight rests, but it's probably not going to rest through 2 or 3 Fire Blasts. There's one Fire Blast, it doesn't miss. You go for another Fire Blast, you get the crit, taking Corviknight out, and now, you go into Delphox, but Delphox gets killed by Earthquake. All you have left is a Grimmsnarl against the world, but Grimmsnarl is paralyzed, so Tauros gets the Body Slam, making Moscato the winner. Now that was also a good game. All of these were really good games. I had a lot of fun watching all of these. So that's about it for round 1. Now, if you don't know what Generation Jumble is, I probably should have waited this long before explaining, but I host tournaments in my server based off my what-if scenarios, and this right here is one of the seasons. And if you want to watch all of the replays from Season 1, I highly recommend joining the Discord server yourself, because in the channel for Tournament Jumble replays, you can see every single one of them. If you want to check out more, go there. But until next time, thank you all for watching. I'll come back to you very soon with round 2. But until then, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.